Welcome to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito from Private Vista. In this podcast, we draw from years of experience as well as guest specialists to help you create the life you imagine. Join us in this journey as we enlighten and empower you to align your lifestyle to help you achieve your goals with a clear picture of your future. Now, let's get to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the Dollars and Cents podcast with your host, Nicole Romito. Nicole, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great, Bill. Good to be seen and good to see you. How are you today?
I'm all right. We're getting this podcast is going to be in the year, so we'll be well into the winter. I hope it is not too cold a winter wherever you are when you're listening to this, but what's on tap today?
Yeah, so I'm super excited to be welcoming back Brendan Cournane. And he was, for our longtime listeners, he was on a prior episode talking about how to deal with stress at year end and the holidays. So welcome back, Brendan.
Thank you, Nicole. Great to be back.
Yeah, we're super excited. And what we're going to be talking about today is kind of a lot of our listeners are executives, and we all experience a lot of stress. And so we all have it. And one of the things I think everyone will find interesting is not all stress is bad. So Brendan's going to walk us through that. And then we're also going to talk about ways to work through your stress, as all of us have, competing priorities. And they certainly seem to be exasperated or agitated even more as we get into holidays and the year end. So that's kind of high level, Bill, what we'll be talking about. Before we go ahead and get started, I'm going to give a brief background on Brendan. He has served as a partner in national law firms and in various roles in the public sector, including general counsel of the Illinois Finance Authority. He has seen the effects of what happens when one's core values do not align with one's profession. ... Malaise and burnout. No surprise. He is a recovering lawyer and is now a professional development coach. He helps his clients understand why they do what they do in life. And the whole point of that is to help them align their core values with how they work and then live for a happier life. So, Brandon, I talked a little bit about your professional. I do want to just add that Brendan also is a certified professional coach and leadership dynamics specialist. So he did transition from being a lawyer, but then got subsequent education and certifications in how he's helping his clients today. Brendan, I know busy on the professional side, I would say equally, if not busier on the personal side. Do you want to share a little bit with our listeners what you enjoy doing when you are not helping your clients?
I enjoy taking walks in nature. I was formerly a marathon runner, recently had a heart diagnosis, so I am changing into practicing a lot of what I preach and what I've learned over the years. My stress management courses and certification and the work that I do with a lot of my clients are things that are personal to me. I work a lot with professionals who are facing burnout or just unsure what they want to do with their lives. And I found through my own diagnosis that even when we live a relatively healthy lifestyle, that stress can build up in us and affect us in ways that can be very quiet until they're not all of a sudden. I've learned to practice a lot more than just exercise as a stress reliever, including things like nice, slow walks or walking through a park, sitting by the beach and watching the waves roll in, journaling, some other things that at one time would have been antithetical to the way that I wanted to live because I was a hard-charging lawyer, type A personality, as many of us are.
Right.
And making that transition is difficult sometimes. Even recognizing the need to make the transition can be hard.
I agree. And not only just recognizing the need, but I know myself, probably you, maybe even today, you're probably better at it, but certainly in your former life as a lawyer, is you get to the point where you feel like you're on that hamster wheel, and you know you need to get off it and kind of just take a breath, regroup, almost just step back. But it's I struggle with even being able to do that, even though I know I'm perpetuating something that's going to be like not a sustainable way to work and go through life. So I'm hoping to get some tips from you on how I can personally incorporate that into my life, but I'm sure our listeners are as well.
The perpetual motion machine that you referred
Yes.
to, I saw the movement going around just like the hamster wheel.
I know. I always think back to my 6th grade pet of the hamster. So
Now, was that your own personal hamster, or were you one of those folks who were given control over the hamster as a class project over the
oh,
holidays?
you know what's interesting, and this might be, I don't, maybe sharing too much. Our grade school, we actually had our class pet was this ginormous white rat.
Hmm.
And like no parents wanted to have it home, but as kids, we all wanted to bring it home.
Of
So
course.
yeah, the hamster was our own family pet, but we all did try to vie for the big rat for the holidays.
Hmm. And there's this desire not to let the hamster stop running because we like watching the hamster and on demand. And of course, the hamster's job was to entertain us as family members and observers. And I find that a lot of those in the professional realm, whether it's in the service business of providing financial services or lawyers or doctors or accountants, we also feel the need to be on call 24/7. It's a lot more difficult to unplug these days because of all the connections we have with our cell phones and computers and things compared to 40 or 50 years ago. And likewise, our stress quotient has increased dramatically over those times with less desire or less ability to unplug. And that, generates a lot of stress in many different ways.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think this one will be again one of our most listened to episodes. So why don't we kind of you've actually shared, I would say, a lot of what we're going to get into today. So maybe I'm thinking we take a step back and let's just even, can you discuss, how there's different types of stress? I know, at least from, again, my personal perspective, I found this really fascinating when you and I were preparing for this episode. Is I just always think of stress as a negative
Hmm.
place to be, if you will. So maybe you can kind of talk about how some stress is negative, some is positive. Even I know you shared a really great experience, how just in one experience, you went through a whole range of different types of stress, and there was positive and negatives with that just in that one experience.
Hmm. Yes, there are basically three types of stress. They're known as eustress, which is stress which comes from a euphoric incident, neustress, which comes from neutral stressors, or distress. And for most of us, if I'd say for 99% plus of the people that I talk to about stress, and I ask them what is stress, they'll come up with something negative in the realm of distress. But new stress or neutral stress, take an example of hearing about a volcano out in the South Pacific. And as human beings, we can empathize with people who live in that area, but it's pretty neutral. We don't have a strong reaction to that, except if that's the place I was going on my honeymoon next week.
Oh.
All of a sudden my focus changes. Or if a family member is there on vacation in that area, all of a sudden this neutral type of stress has more meaning to us, is more consequential. And another type is euphoric stress, or eustress, which entails things like getting married, falling in love, getting the job promotion, things that we think help us achieve something that we want. And then all of a sudden there's that realization that, uh-oh, my name's on the door. I've got to step up my game and get more clients and more money and on and on and on. And that hamster wheel keeps turning. So we have something that's euphoric in a way that's helpful to us. But it's not only in our professional world. One of the examples that I think of is when I graduated from 8th grade. I remember my parents wanting to do something special for me. And I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago, and there was this place called Rainbow Cone. They've come around a lot now and are spreading around the metropolitan area and other areas like Indiana and Michigan. But at that time, there was one original rainbow cone at 92nd and Western. And I remember on graduation day from 8th grade, my parents took me there. And I was in my brand new suit, shirt, and tie, which is one of the things that kids did at that time.
Right.
When
I was like, wait, did you just say
grade.
8th grade and you're all suited up?
Yeah, it was one of those Catholic schools. So we dressed up in suit, tie, and sport coat or
So
suit.
you knew you wanted to be a lawyer at a young age then.
Exactly. I was preparing early. And I was euphoric about the idea of having a rainbow cone. And so I'm very happy. And then I go, and we graduated later in the day. So we went kind of in the afternoon for the ice cream. And it was a warm day. It was in June. And the ice cream cone melted before I could finish it. And it melted onto my shirt and my suit coat.
Oh.
So all of a sudden, what am I going to do? My brand new clothes. And of course, when you're in 8th grade, you tend to grow pretty quickly. So I didn't have a lot of other clothes that I could fall back on as far as changing. So I went from a state of euphoria to a state of distress in about 30 seconds when this ice cream melted on me. And, that's just one kind of an example that we face different fact patterns, but in our daily lives now, we can shift among neutral stress, euphoric stress, distress very quickly. The common element is stress. The father of stress, a fellow by the name of Hans Seeley, identified 3 different elements to our body's reaction to stress. And there's an alarm reaction, which is the trigger, the ice cream falling on my suit.
Okay.
There is the reaction that we have to that stress. How do we respond both immediately and longer term? And then finally, there's a state of exhaustion. And if we don't deal or don't cope with stress, we keep going until we're so fatigued that we can't continue. Or if we keep pushing beyond that, we can even die from stress. And, we've seen a lot of examples of that where people push too hard and finally die, like the hamster you had at home on that hamster wheel. If that hamster kept on going for 36, 48 hours, it's probably not going to last too much longer than that. And the eventual reality is exhaustion or death.
Yeah. And I think sadly, I think many of us know, or you certainly hear the stories of, Joe looked like a really healthy 45-year-old. And, he had the heart attack while he was playing basketball or on the treadmill. And he was like the picture of health. And how did that happen? So I think a lot of that, could be stress, could certainly cause that, or certainly help elevate that risk.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it can. And looks can be deceiving. You can't look at somebody and say, well, that person's going to die of a heart attack, or that person is going to stroke out.
Right.
Some of it is genetically inclined. Some of it is behaviorally inclined. But ultimately, it's how our body processes stress and the coping techniques that we have to alleviate stress. And I know from both my background and a lot of the clients that I work with, we don't want to take breaks. I worked with a lawyer when I was practicing law who was very proud of the fact that he would sometimes bill more than 24 hours a day. And he said, I could do this legitimately because I would start my day in New York. I would fly to the West Coast. So I got an extra 3 hours, and I could bill those hours legitimately and say it was on today. So, he was doing that as a badge of honor, that he could work around the clock and bill 27 hours in a day. But is that different from what so many of us do when we want to have that one more call, that one more sales call, that little bit of time to look to see if the investment portfolio could be tweaked a little bit to get a little bit more for the client, or just one more sale, one more widget out the door? When is enough? And, our bodies respond in different ways, but ultimately, Well, you may have heard about the fight, flight, or freeze concept
Yes.
that we have.
Yeah. Yep.
When there's a stressor, go back to those three stressors of the alarm reaction, the response, and the exhaustion phase. When we think about that, when something triggers us, our bodies transmit things like cortisol or epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline.
Okay.
And that's really to get us out of a stressful situation. To the old example of running away from the saber-toothed tiger. When a saber-toothed tiger jumps out of the grass at us, we either want to fight it or run away from it or freeze and hope that it doesn't see or smell us so that it will attack us. And when we do that, our body produces cortisol and adrenaline, which can help us make those decisions almost immediately. All of those are short term. The adrenaline burst gives us enough energy to get away from the saber-toothed tiger, but it's not going to get us from France to Germany to run away from it. There's a limited amount of time that we have.
Well, maybe for you, since you're a marathon runner, you might be able to do that.
And likewise, when we're looking at calming down, our body regenerates. And when we look at the way that our body produces things like cortisol or epinephrine, it also needs time to reabsorb. I think about an example of I was on safari in Africa, and we watched this herd of zebras just grazing on the grass, and all of a sudden, some lions approached and attacked the herd, and the herd ran away. And one of the zebras was caught, and then the rest of the herd came back and chased off the lion. Now, in that element, the zebras individually and as a herd had a rush of adrenaline to get away from it, to fight and flee. The lions had adrenaline to go get dinner because they were hungry. Importantly, whether the zebras win or lose and the lions get fed or not, once that incident is over, in like 5 minutes, 6 minutes of time at the most, either the zebra's killed or they all get away and the lions retreat. But it's over and they can absorb all those elements again. As humans, we need to do the same thing. Once we get that rush of cortisol or adrenaline to deal with the situation at hand, we need time to let it reabsorb into our bodies to relax. And if we continue to generate more cortisol and adrenaline, eventually that buildup can be deadly, harmful, if not deadly.
Yeah, there's definitely physical repercussions to having the mental stress. So I think as we look at that, so we've identified the different types of stress. It could start as a physical stress, but it manifests or could impact you physically. Thought maybe we could certainly want to talk, I would think about, how are there ways or techniques to manage stress? And then also too, one of the things I know myself and, I'm sure you do, and like other executives or professional partners, is how does this play into relationship dynamics?
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked a lot about the stress of, especially when you get towards year end, that's usually a very stressful time for people, right? You're trying to make your sales goals, or I know law firms are trying to collect on their billings. Our industry, we have a lot of, we have a 12/31 deadline. So there are things you can't just defer. You have to get them in. So a lot of that pressured with also a lot of social things going on. And even if it's not externally socially, but if you are in a relationship and or have kids or family or things like that, dealing with, I think that in itself can be stressful. Of, you and I talked about, well, I'm the breadwinner for my family, and it's important to me to provide for my family, but it's also important for me and my family to spend quality time together.
And that's true. And that's something that most professionals deal with, especially those who are type A driven and who are used to being the breadwinner or the main breadwinner in the family. And
Right.
even if they're not, there's sometimes a little bit of competition among people in a family as to who's going to have a dollar more at the end of the year, who's going to be able to buy that extra holiday present for somebody in the family. And I think many of us there have been a lot of studies done as to why lawyers, for example, have such a high rate of substance abuse and alcoholism, but also mental health issues. And I think while it's true primarily for lawyers in the studies that I've seen, I think it's true for other professions as well, that many of us are trained to be pessimists and perfectionists. Pessimists in the way that what could possibly go wrong with the deal I'm working on? And how do I counteract that in advance so that it doesn't happen? Looking for all the things that could go wrong and draft around it or prepare for it so that it doesn't. And perfectionism, that I have to do everything right. And it's a comparison of me versus you, me versus
Right.
the other people in the deal, me versus the marketplace for the financial professionals. How do I outthink the market? How do I get my deal closed by 11:59 on midnight on December 31st into January 1st? And the idea that if something goes wrong, it's because I didn't control it enough. Now, even taking to the point that we might be able to interact in some ways to make things easier or less easy to close or not close, it's very hard to flip that switch from that kind of a mindset when we go home at the end of the day. And that's where a lot of things really happen with professional relationships. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that even the way we interact with our families or our friends is interpreted differently. If I interact with somebody and ask them questions, because of all the work I've done as a lawyer, it seems confrontational. It seems like I'm
You're
challenging them
interrogating them.
or arguing or interrogating them.
Right.
And sometimes it helps if I say things like, well, I'm just curious. But if my tone of voice and my body language is such that I'm not turning that switch off from office Brendan to at home Brendan,
Right.
how is that interpreted by those who are around me? And so that's one of those times where some coping techniques can be used, that in that time period from when I shut down at the office and close my computer to getting home, what do I do? I can do breathing techniques. I can do some interactive things that allow me to separate what was 5 minutes ago to what is now or will be in 10 minutes when I get home.
Right.
Of course, that's a little bit more difficult with a lot of people working from home right now, because instead of the half hour difference,
on that, right?
we're walking 30 feet or
Right.
10 feet from one room to the other. So it behooves us to kind of put in place some things to just kind of separate the two and recognize that I need a different persona. I need a different way to respond and react, because every time we interact with some people, place, or thing around us, that's a stressor. We talked before about the three phases, that
Right.
anything that interacts with us is a stressor of some sort. It could be positive, it could be neutral, or it could be distressful. And how our bodies respond generates how we come across to somebody else. So, one thing to do is just take a moment. One of the easiest coping techniques is just thinking about Darth Vader breathing. Think about Darth Vader. And that's a response that I get from quite a lot of folks, that they say, you want me to become Darth Vader. And I don't want you to become Darth Vader with the Empire, but it's a way to relax the body. And it's a breathing technique that can be done very easily in just a couple of seconds. And if you bear with me, we can try it right now.
Okay, that'd be great.
I want you to just sit in a nice, comfortable position.
Okay.
Let your shoulders just kind of relax, let gravity kind of pull them down onto
This is
on your
relaxed.
chest.
No.
And there's always a little bit more relaxation that we can do. And while you're in this,
Absolutely.
just take a couple of deep breaths through your nose, and exhale. And while you're doing these breathing techniques, you're stimulating the vagus nerve, which is causing relaxation. And now for the Darth Vader breath. If you take your hand and put it in front of your mouth,
Okay.
and inhale through your nose and exhale through your hands, towards your hands, so you can hear it. And you can feel the breath on your hand, and you can also hear it audibly. So that's the way that you want to breathe. But this time, instead of breathing out towards your hand, keep your mouth closed. So inhale through your nose and exhale through your nose, keeping your mouth closed. And you hear, you can almost hear the reverberation like you were Darth Vader in that. Sometimes it's referred to as ocean breath because we kind of hear the waves rolling into the ocean. So whether you're thinking about Star Wars and Darth Vader or being on the ocean, this is a way to stimulate the vagus nerve, the long nerve in the body that causes relaxation. And when we do that, even in just a couple of moments, we can transition or help to transition from Office Brendan, the lawyer, who is worried about closing a deal by December 31st, to who I want to be at home, Brendan, that when I interact with my family, I'm a little bit calmer.
Right. And I just have to say for our listeners, I just doing that I don't even think it was a minute we did that. And I physically felt like something like shake loose in my head. And just felt like calmer and more present. So one thing I think to highlight that many of us, sometimes we think it has to be this whole big like production to be able to, change your mindset or just change kind of how you're feeling. So I think that's a key thing I wanted to highlight for our listeners is, we just did that in 30 seconds. And then as you noted, maybe you do it for a minute or two. And that's something whether you are taking the train home or driving, or even if you're going from your home office and you're going to go join the rest of the people that live with you in a different room, that's something you can easily do before going to interact on the personal side.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it can be done anywhere. And,
right.
Some of these exercises, people have the misconception that I have to do it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour.
Right.
Even when I talk with people about meditation, the idea of meditation means I've got to go to the Himalayas, climb Mount Everest, and sit next to a guy with, a beard down to his ankles,
right,
and in a sackcloth on the top of a mountain. And meditation can be done just like this breathing exercise we did. It can be just a minute or a couple of minutes. It's a way to reset. So one of the ideas about any kind of coping technique is to be willing to change the mindset of preconceived notions about the length of time or even the immediacy of the results. I worked with a client not too long ago and talked about meditation and her idea. She was a doctor, and her idea was that she could not take 10 minutes out of a day to meditate or to think about meditation. So we progressed
I resemble
to say,
that remark.
many of us do. I'm sure
right?
You and I are not the only ones who
No.
feel that way. But can you do 5 minutes? No. Can you do a minute? No. Can you do 3 or 4 breaths? And I'll try 3 or 4 breaths. And it is
those lawyering skills
laughing.
Of negotiation are still useful.
Right. But it's the idea of what am I willing to do? What am I willing to try?
Yep.
And the other thing is that I have found it easier not always to think about the process while I'm in the process, but if I'm going to try for 2 minutes of quiet meditation, there are 2 ways that I can do it. the first one that I always tried is I'm going to sit here and think that when 2 minutes are over, I'm going to come out of my practice stage, only to find out that what I think is 2 minutes is actually about 10 seconds. Time stands still when I'm doing that.
Right.
So I found that there are some apps that have timers that I can say, I'm willing to try this for 2 minutes, set the timer for 2 minutes, and know that I don't have to do anything until that chime goes off in 2 minutes. And even if I'm a little anxious, I can say, I'm not responsible for coming out of my thought process until this chime happens. And that's been very rewarding and also very relaxing to me, because the perfectionist in me, the pessimist that I can't do this, is removed because I'm allowing something else, this chimer, to be part of this meditation practice or this quiet time.
Yeah. I've also found with some of the apps, when you're doing like the guided meditation, it's uncanny how they give that prompt, like as my mind is starting to wander, and then they'll
Mhm.
be like, oh, it's okay if your mind's wandering, like let that thought go and come back. So it's not fully guided or things like that, but just having those little prompts to be like, hey, it's okay. We're not looking for perfection here.
Mhm.
And then B, it is kind of the little like nudge to be like, oh, yep, I was, doing my grocery list in my head. Let's come back to trying to just, be and not be doing things.
Yeah, and that's very common that our mind wanders. And even the Dalai Lama has been known to have his mind wandering when he's trying to meditate for 5 minutes.
Oh, well,
So you're
I
not
think that should
alone.
make all of us feel better.
Just know that you're like the Dalai Lama.
Oh,
But,
first time I've heard that. So
it's not just the breathing technique, but we can also do other things like taking a walk in nature. We're getting into a cold season in the upper Midwest, but still walking around the block. Or if you are near Lake Michigan in Chicago or some of the parks, walk through the park and just observe. I work with a lot of athletes as well, and I want them to be sensual in their approach to how they're training. And sensual by looking and feeling something with all 5 senses. When you're in the middle of taking a walk, pause for a second, and what are 3 things that you see or hear or smell or taste or touch? And you don't have to do all 5 of them, but just pick one sense. And for 30 seconds, what are 3 things that I taste? We can almost taste the wind blowing something as we're walking. If your olfactory senses are triggered, you can almost taste the ribs on a barbecue in the summertime, or the taste of a cold beer as you're walking through the park. So we can taste things even if we're not physically absorbing them. But we can also use our senses in other ways, like, what do I hear? And try to make a list, even if it's 1 or 2 things. It brings that sensory perception. And to do that, those are times when you take the earbuds out or put the phone down, not checking email messages, because we often miss so much of what's around us when we're absorbed with our devices.
I've been trying to be better about that, if I'm going to take a walk, like just like you said, don't do the earbuds or anything like that. And just listen to the noise around me, or even if I'm not doing that, it's just not having an outside stimulus that's keeping the brain going or distracting you, or not allowing you to just be present. So I definitely noticed a difference, and I like it. So
yeah.
Well,
And
good.
when we think about things that are easy to miss, I was doing some research recently, and I came across a psychological study from, I think it was done in the late 90s, and it's referred to as the invisible gorilla. And I don't know if you've ever heard about this, but it was
I
a
don't think
study.
so.
There was a book written on this called The Invisible Gorilla, but it was done by a couple of psychiatrists, one of whom is at the University of Illinois, and another one I think was at Harvard. And they filmed two teams passing a basketball back and forth, one dressed in white shirts, one dressed in black shirts. And the mission for them, for the people observing this, was to count the number of passes that were made by the team in the white shirts. So you could either pass it through the air or bounce pass it or something. And in the course of about a minute or 2 minutes they were filming, how many times was the ball passed? Now, interestingly, in the middle of this, a person dressed in a full gorilla suit walked across the middle of where they were passing the ball. And over 40% of the people did not see the gorilla.
Wow.
Now, you might think that seeing a 5.5-foot person dressed in a gorilla suit would be pretty easy to see.
Right.
But a surprising number of people, because you're not thinking about that. It's unexpected. And their studies show that we as humans are like that, which kind of goes to the idea of when we multitask.
Yes.
What is it that we're missing?
Right.
And
so much.
And that's just one example. That we're unaware, and we don't even know what we're unaware of until we start paying attention.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I think you could miss like a gorilla walking through in real life, but I get it. I'm thinking of just other situations where I've been either so go, or just absorbed in one particular thing. You're like, I can't take in one more outside stimulus. So, So, I mean, as usual, you and I could sit here all day, if not longer. I love that we talked about, the different kinds of stress. They're not all, some are additive or positive. We talked a little bit about some techniques of as you're transitioning from your work life back to your personal life. And even if it's just going from your office to the living room, channel your inner Darth Vader. I love that we can do that, right? And you don't need to buy anything or have anything on hand. What else? Is there anything else you'd either like to highlight or reiterate as we wrap up today to help people to be able to recognize the stress and then try to process it? And I would think if it's the disruptive kind, how to reduce it or eliminate it.
I'd like people to remember that stress comes in all shapes and sizes. And when we're asked by somebody, how are you feeling? If we say, I'm so busy, that's the first sign that we need to open our minds a little bit. Why are we so busy? What are we afraid of letting go? Is it something about us that defines us? Or am I afraid of what I might find if I take some time off? And I think that's the first step for us. When I work with clients, I often come back to asking them two questions. The first is, in a situation or trying to resolve something, what are your motives? What are you trying to accomplish by this? Are you trying to accomplish a more quiet lifestyle or more peaceful lifestyle? And then the second question is, once we know what our motives are that are driving us, what are you afraid of? Because typically the fears that we have are either I'm going to lose something that I have, or I'm not going to get something that I want. And whether I'm afraid of losing something or not getting something, that often shapes the motives that we have, which also shapes the actions that we have or the actions that we're willing to take. And if I am in a situation where I can identify my fears and not judging whether my fears are either rational, realistic, or positive or negative, but once I recognize them, I can take the next step and say, is this what I really want to work towards, or kind of move away from to have a better lifestyle for myself, more peace of mind for myself, more interaction, a calmer interaction with my friends and family.
Yeah, I love that. And I know too, I think maybe playing in there too is if you're not running around like the hamster on the wheel or trying to deal with 85 things at once, and you do just set and be, is like what feelings or emotions are going to arise. And it's most likely either stuff you don't want to deal with, right? So you just keep pushing them down and overlaying it with all these activities and stuff. But I do think the fear is there of, oh, am I going to finally have to deal with this, or even just start to think about it?
Right.
And no one likes being afraid. So,
Well, think about that hamster for a minute. And when you see the hamster on the wheel, ask yourself, or you can even talk to the hamster and ask the hamster, are you running away from something or are you running towards something?
right.
And in the case of the hamster on the wheel, does it matter because the wheel's not changing?
Right, exactly. Or moving. So, I mean, moving from the position. So, yeah. Well, thanks again. I so appreciate you taking your time to be with us today and sharing what I know is a small bit of your wisdom. So thank you so much. Before we wrap up for the day, I like to ask my guests kind of where would you most like to live in the world and why? I'm thinking you're probably going to say where you are today, because I feel like you've pretty much been to every corner of this world, and and you're still in the Midwest. So, but
I am still in the Midwest, and I find it very interesting because the answer to that is going to depend on the day and the location. Because just about any place I've been in the world could be conducive to living for a period of time. Even when I travel to Antarctica to run a marathon, Antarctica can be a really nice place to live at certain times of the year when you have 23 hours of daylight. You can get a lot done in 23 hours.
That's true.
Um,
that lawyer you referenced at the beginning of the episode may
right.
want to open the Antarctica office.
Exactly right. And, the thing about Antarctica is that all the time zones are compressed because it's at the bottom of the world. So in the matter of moving just a few miles, you could get into 6 or 7 different time zones.
Wow. That's a little bit mind-boggling.
It is. But even places like that, and I love, we have a place in southwestern Michigan, which is in the woods. We have a place on the
that's such a beautiful
Chicago.
part of the Midwest. So
and
I love going up there.
Both of them are very conducive to a lot of relaxation techniques.
Absolutely. Well, good for you. If any of our listeners would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
My email is coach@coachbrendan.com. My website is coachbrendan.com. And I am happy to answer all questions from folks. I make presentations. I do half-day and full-day workshops. I do one-on-one professional development coaching to help work through stress management and ideas for coping skills. So willing to talk with any of you, to make presentations, and to share some of the techniques that I found that work for me.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Always a pleasure to speak with you and the folks at Private Vista.
That was a great conversation. I really enjoyed listening to that. I like conversations about stress, mostly because, Brendan, I spent almost 4 decades in live television.
No stress there.
Yeah, no stress there.
So I was just like, but here's my question. What if you're addicted to stress? Because I do like stress, because I find that stress does focus the mind. It focuses intentions. So it's easy to become addicted to stress. How do you break an addiction to stress?
Your comment is very common. Most people who work a lot or are hard driven, the type A personalities, find that their coping techniques is more stressful than what they're trying to break. And that's true because when we think about coping with stress, it includes things like working a lot or substance abuse, alcohol, but it also includes things like anger. I mean, there are so many things that we cope that we think are ways to relieve the stress. So the first question is, what am I trying to accomplish and what am I willing to do? And it may be just that I'm willing to stop working at 10 o'clock at night for a week and not go between 10 and 12 to get something done. I'm willing to trust that somebody else in my firm can take over a responsibility for me and allow me to have dinner. So it's, what am I willing to do, but what am I looking to do as well? And then being open-minded enough to try something, recognizing that it may not work at first.
Mm.
The first time you try to stop work at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night because you're routinely working till 10 or 11 at night, it's going to feel really strange. In fact, there's a concept called retirement disease that people strive and strive and strive to retire, only to find that there's nothing left in their life when they walk away from their job. It has been so encompassing and so
Right.
self-identifying that
Yeah.
they can't deal with it. So part of it is to have a plan of what you're willing to try in the interim, not necessarily a full substitution for the work hours, but more that what am I willing to try? Am I willing to try taking a walk? Am I willing to try to learn to play bridge? Am I learning to play solitaire? What is it that I could find even for a short period of time and allow myself the time to see if it works or doesn't work? And try to do that without judgment that it's good or bad if it doesn't work out in the first day or 2 days. It's going to take time to unlearn some of these things that
Yeah.
have been life forming.
Man, that is so, so true. Yeah. I don't know if I've got the patience to unlearn them, though. I just don't. I don't know. Nicole, it's we know how to get a hold of Brendan. If somebody is interested in listening to this podcast who wants to maybe have a conversation with you, how do they reach out to you and the folks at My Private Vista?
Sure. So they can do one of two things. They can go to our website, which is myprivatevista.com. On the homepage, if they choose the contact us button, put in their information, please reference this episode. Myself or one of my wonderful colleagues will follow up. Or you can give us a call at 312-831-4370. And our receptionist can, again, connect you with one myself or one of my teammates.
That's fantastic. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast who are not subscribers, there's one thing that you can do that will cost you no time or effort. Hit the follow button, become a subscriber. That way, every time a new episode drops, you'll be notified and you can give it a listen. I would also ask that if you like this podcast, tell other people about it, please. Word of mouth promotion is very welcome. We would appreciate it, as a matter of fact. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker, thanking you on behalf of Nicole Romito and everybody at My Private Vista. Thanks for taking the time to listen today. And we remind you that you can go out today and make today a great day or not. It's your choice. Use it wisely. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Dollars and Cents Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito, sponsored by Private Vista. Visit our website at www.myprivatevista.com or give us a call at 312-831-4370. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Private Vista is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is neither indicative nor a guarantee of future results. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data or other information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analyses, prices, or other data or information contained in this presentation is provided as general market commentary and does not constitute investment advice. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties expressed or implied as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions, or results obtained from the use of this information. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC assume no liability for action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to this information. The information is provided as of the date referenced. Such data and other information are subject to changes without notice. This was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors LLC or any of its affiliates.